Ever since the success of Overwatch and the hero shooter trend, it's been inevitable that other developers would want to carve out their own piece of this wildly successful pie, and Bleeding Edge aims to do just this on both Xbox and PC in March of this year. Before we move on to anything else, I should absolutely make it clear that Bleeding Edge isn't a shooter. In fact, when launching the game on PC, it even recommended that I use a controller for the best experience. All shooting is done using a lock-on system, and the entire game in general places a large emphasis on hand-to-hand combat. In fact, the only time a player is really required to aim is when using bigger area of effect abilities. In many respects, Bleeding Edge is far closer to a third-person MOBA than a hero shooter, but regardless of the classification, most viewers will likely find the general concept at least somewhat familiar. It would be easy to call Bleeding Edge another Overwatch clone when looking at its hero design, which features lazy Lucio, thick Zarya, and Microsoft Paint Genji, but the similarities end much sooner than you might think. Bleeding Edge sees teams of 4 compete over objectives such as capture point and an interesting resource gathering mode, which incentivizes tactical and decisive play to swing the match in your favor. Bleeding Edge, in general, provides a high incentive to fight, as getting eliminations will directly impact the score, but also allow a much easier snowball onto the rest of the team. Fights are hugely dependent on having as many players as possible piling on at the same time, and not a single instance of seeing either a friend or foe out of position ended without them getting severely punished for their mistakes. Let's talk about the characters who ultimately make or break a game in this genre. There's a lot to mention, but purely based on their cosmetic appeal, the developers get an excellent grade. So much style and creativity has been poured into these characters, and it's clear that at no point during the process of designing them did someone tell an artist that a robot snake controlling a corpse had gone too far. Admittedly, Bleeding Edge may unfortunately fall into the same category as Overwatch, with some characters just seeming so much fucking cooler than others. This goes back to another problem I've talked about in Overwatch for years, as not only are there far more damage dealers than tanks and supports, but in general, the damage role seems to hoard the most aesthetically pleasing characters. This may or may not bother players depending on their own taste, but nothing makes a casual player want to entirely neglect a role more than making them less interesting, less satisfying, and less visually appealing. It's hard to tell with my limited playtime how well balanced the characters are as they currently stand, but it certainly seemed much easier to find success with some rather than others. Like many MOBA type games, the entire balance philosophy seems to be, as long as everything is overpowered, then nothing is overpowered. I'm not one to know whether an auto lock freeze ability or a high damage ultimate with no wind up is too strong. But in the age where game-breaking bugs are rarely around for a single day, this shouldn't be a concern. What makes me worried, however, is how many similarities Bleeding Edge shares with launch day Overwatch. The game is incredibly well polished, looks stylish as fuck, and has the potential for a large following, an esports audience, and impressive expansion. What concerns me is that it will also run into the same pitfalls that similar games have had to contend with over the years. It didn't take much playtime before discovering that picking budget Lucio and pressing a single button to deliver unlimited healing made it almost impossible for my pocket to lose a fight, and this scared me more than anything else. Although I love the thought that anyone from all skill levels can jump in and enjoy the game, I couldn't help but shudder at the painful memory of Mercy being an absolute must pick for 4 fucking months straight. When there are only 3 tanks and supports to play around with, it just makes me fear that the huge differences between them will dictate that only 1 or 2 can ever be a viable choice. This is perhaps a case of connecting a myriad of dots that don't even exist, but the health and longevity of a game of this kind relies so heavily on an ever-shifting ideal composition, a challenge that even some of the best developers at one of the most historically prestigious studios on Earth are only now figuring out how to properly solve. The good news is that the characters themselves seem to have a lot more bells and whistles than Overwatch, with all of them being given away to move across the map much more quickly, and the addition of a mod system that may or may not lead to a larger variety in playstyles. This, however, remains to be seen, as this kind of system was present in Dirty Bomb and would usually just lead to one ideal loadout, standing head and shoulders above the rest. The Ultimates system was, however, a very welcome addition, with every character given access to one of two choices, which both gave each hero greater variation and made me crave this kind of choice for other games in the same genre. Activating an ability that makes you unkillable for 5 seconds at the brink of losing a fight makes you feel like an absolute champion, but I can't help feel that the guy on the other team felt cheated out of a kill they rightfully earned. Some features, on the other hand, seemed like they could have used some work. The ping system especially almost seemed a bit out of place for a game where you can't freely aim, and it's immediately clear that it wasn't designed for a keyboard and mouse in mind. Apex Legends may have created a system that goes down in history as a staple of team-based combat games, but it's becoming apparent that many developers have struggled to replicate its gold standard. The real question is whether I'd recommend this to players who are fans of hero shooters, and to that, I say maybe. It just depends on what end of the shooter spectrum you find yourself. This is not a game for people who primarily play games like Counter-Strike and love learning the recoils of every gun and mastering the art of flicking to a player's head. If you play a game like Overwatch to flex your mechanical prowess and carried yourself to diamond by getting super good at clicking heads, then this may not be designed for you in mind. Winning in Bleeding Edge is all about maximizing the teamwork of yourself and the other 3 people on your side, and very much learning how to look at the flow of a team fight and what your team can do to exploit the weaknesses of the enemy composition. It's not to say that there isn't a fair level of mechanical depth to be understood, but Bleeding Edge certainly seems to be on the strategic end of the spectrum when it comes to team-based games. This is a MOBA disguised as a shooter, so it will be interesting to see exactly what kind of market it most successfully captures, but very likely it will somewhat appeal to fans in both camps. Bleeding Edge will very likely be included with the Xbox Game Pass, which is in itself such an incredibly cheap way to play games, so if you happen to already have the pass and are even slightly interested, it would be hard to not justify at least trying it for yourself. After long stretches of playing sweaty games that are likely to tilt you halfway off the planet, it's nice to just have a more casual title where you and your friends can bully strangers online for a while. Although it will likely be a long road ahead for Bleeding Edge, the amount of polish, even in its current state, will at its worst be an impressive offering that wasn't designed with you in mind, and at its best, an insanely fun team-based brawler that will leave you genuinely accomplished for scoring a win, even when there isn't anything on the line. By now, you probably know whether you would or wouldn't enjoy this game. The only question is whether you're bothered to press start on the download come the late March release date. It's really that fucking simple.